I'll start out with the old water noose jump and growl.
So if anyone were to ask me, what is your personal favorite Pixar movie? You'd think my answer would be either one of the Toy Stories, Incredibles, or Up. But my answer would be Monsters, Inc. I love this movie so much. The characters are some of Pixar's most memorable they've made. I always love Sully and Mike. I've never gotten tired of them, and the voice acting is still really well done. And the animation still holds up nearly 20 years later, and this score is so good, man. Like, listen to this soundtrack, it's just jamming. The story and writing I think are also really strong, and man, that ending, just wow. This is a movie I love. Heck, I still have the movie on VHS, the blue tape and all. That's how much I really like this movie. I even enjoyed its prequel, and the new Disney Plus series is pretty decent for what it is.
We'd have you do more, but we learned last year about a thing called child labor laws.
Wait, what? So yeah, I love this movie so much. It's my personal favorite Pixar movie, and along with Lilo and Stitch and Aladdin, it's probably my favorite Disney movie ever, and one of my favorite films of all time. And development-wise, it was a lot smoother than Toy Story 2, but have any of you seen the early designs for Mike and Sully in this test animation? Armless Mike literally gives me nightmares every time I see him. Monsters Inc. also had a fair share of video games too. The only one I played when I was little was the GBA game. I never played any of the other games. I didn't play Scare Island or Scream Arena, whatever this PC game was. However, all of these were not based off the story of the movie like the GBA game was. But there actually was a Monsters Inc. game that was based off the movie's plot, just simply titled Monsters Inc. for the PlayStation 2. This game was published by Sony and Disney Interactive, and surprisingly, it was not developed by Traveler's Tales like usual. Instead, it was handled by a studio called Kodiak Interactive. There isn't a lot on Kodiak Interactive as a studio, but oh boy, the development for this game was something else. Alright, so Kodiak Interactive were developing a game called Goblin Quest. However, they did not find any publishers for it, so it got cancelled. Disney did take interest in it, but they asked them to base it off their upcoming movie, which of course was Monsters Inc. However, development was extremely rough, leading to the game being drastically different from when it was shown off. Many of the levels were scrapped, no live system, no side missions, none of that. And most of all, the company was not doing well, and they had to close their doors in December of 2001, which by that time the game was not yet complete. So they had a few people work at home to finish it on time, which they managed to do. But once you start playing the final game, you could see the cracks in it, which I'll get into later. Here's another weird thing. If you notice on the back of the box, Kodiak obviously isn't listed, but instead it was A2M, who nowadays is known as Behavior Interactive, and they also handled the other Monsters Inc. game that came out around this time. Here's the thing though, they had nothing to do with this game. I don't know why their logo was even printed on the back, or how it was overlooked by the person who made this cover. Now, I must stress that this game that I'm talking about today is not to be confused with Scare Island, or Scream Team as it's known here in the US. That was a prequel to the movie and was the other Monsters Inc. game that was by A2M, which was on the PS1 and PS2, and is more well remembered by people. This game though is not talked about very much. In fact, I've never really seen anyone talk about this game whenever they bring up Disney or Pixar games. I couldn't even find that many reviews of this game online. Though this could be because the game was only released in North America, which is interesting because the PS2 version of Scare Island was only released in the UK. I should also note that I will be using the PS2 classic version on the PS3 for convenience. But anyways, let's see how this awfully forgotten Pixar game holds up. Firstly, now that we are on the 6th generation of consoles, we obviously are dealing with much more powerful hardware. Well, unless you count the Dreamcast version of Toy Story 2. So in that case, this is the second Pixar game to reach the 6th generation of consoles. Now the game does follow the movie pretty closely, and wow, the movie clips actually don't look too bad. In fact, they look pretty good this time. We still have the weird dubbing for some characters, which is odd since some of them are the same actors from the movie, but used a different take? Here, listen to this scene compared to the movie.
I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die, and I'll silence anyone who gets in my way! I'll kidnap 1,000 children before I let this company die, and I'll silence anyone who gets in my way!
Just really odd, but otherwise the FMVs actually look and sound pretty nice this time. Now the graphics look alright for a PS2 game, and the models I think look pretty good. Definitely a lot better than the nightmare fuel Scare Island had. Voice acting is pretty good all around. While not all the original voice actors return, the replacements do a pretty good job playing the characters. In fact, I couldn't even tell that it wasn't John Goodman or Billy Crystal until I really listened to them. That's how good they were. Though these mouth animations are pretty awful, but kinda funny. Soundtrack is jazzy, just like the movie score, and these songs are a great listen. Like even the main menu theme slaps hard. I will say though, and maybe it's just because I'm playing the PS2 classic version, but the frame rate is pretty choppy. Usually I don't mind odd frame rate in a lot of games, as long as it isn't noticeable and doesn't hinder the gameplay, I don't mind it. But here it's so choppy and it kinda made me dizzy a bit, but again, this could be because I'm playing the PS2 classic version and not the original release. But overall, the presentation is decent, but nothing spectacular. So, how does the game play? Well, it's a 3D platformer where you can only play as Sully and you either have to reach the end of the stage, or in some cases grab special items for a character. I am a little disappointed that you could only play as Sully though. It would have been nice to at least play as Mike too, since, you know, he's like the other main character from the movie. But according to some press releases, Mike was intended to be playable, but was scrapped because of the game's rushed development. Sully controls kinda slippery, like when I move him it's not too bad, but platforming feels so sloppy. It almost feels like every time I jump on a platform, Sully's gonna fall off. Sully can also use his tail to attack enemies, which works, but the animation looks weird, like it just doesn't look right. I feel like Sully's gonna throw up after spinning like that. And of course Sully can scare, which is used for switches and such. Okay, so the game itself is pretty unpolished. Like I said before, the platforming feels clunky and the controls are a little slippery, but I found some weird things that would happen out of nowhere and a lot of it just doesn't look like it functions correctly. Like look at this, it doesn't really look like it's supposed to do that. Now yes, this could be because of the troubled development this game went through, but I'm looking at this game how it is, and the game in general is just unfinished. For the most part though, the levels aren't that bad. There's only 8 in the game, so it's pretty short. There was gonna be a lot more, but once again, it had a rushed development, and we never saw more levels. Though let me just say that the garbage disposal was awful. For one, the level is way too dark. Every time you fall off, you have to find a spring to get back up. Not to mention the platforming is probably at its worst here, and there are CDA agents that can kill you instantly, which by the way, you can't kill any of them. They are invincible. Just an awful stage and the absolute low point of the game. All the other stages were pretty alright though. I did like this one stage where you're in the apartments and you gotta find all the materials to make Boo's costume. It's pretty decent. Strangely, there were no bosses in the game. I mean, there is the final showdown with Waternoose, but it's barely even a boss fight. You just hit switches and that's it. You don't even fight Randall at all. He appears in the stages to taunt you and even appears in the final showdown, but you never actually fight him. There are collectibles you can find that either unlock movie clips or these bonus stages, which are okay I guess. I do like how most of the bonus stages use the training door simulation from the movie. That's pretty cool. There are also some behind the scenes features you could view for the movie which are really cool. In fact, this game came out before the DVD release, so it's pretty cool to see these extras, and just seeing what Pixar looked like back when Monsters Inc. was their most recent film. It's really interesting. If anything, these are the big highlights of the game. Honestly though, past that, there just isn't anything else about this game, mostly because of how short it is. You can beat it in an hour and a half, which makes this one of the shortest Pixar games I've played for this marathon. But what do I think of the game overall? Well, there are good things about it. I like the extras, the voice acting, the music, and the levels overall, with the exception of that garbage level, are fine. but the game overall is just very mediocre, and I'm being very generous saying that. It's definitely an interesting game for sure, but I can see why this game isn't brought up that much as other games like Scare Island. And while I was writing for this review, I actually did play Scare Island / Screen Team for the first time, and I can definitely say it's a much more enjoyable game than Monsters Inc. on the PS2. So yeah, I personally wouldn't recommend playing this. It's not terrible, and honestly I'd kind of prefer to play this game over the first Toy Story game. The first Toy Story game is technically a better game, but it's just so unfair and I don't really enjoy playing it that much. Monsters Inc. though isn't frustrating, in fact it's a breeze compared to the first Toy Story game, and I think kids would probably like this game okay. However, compared to other Pixar games like A Bug's Life and Toy Story 2, this is a definite step back from both of those games, and this is coming from someone who loves Monsters Inc. as a movie. Like again, Monsters Inc. is my favorite Pixar movie, but even I will say this game is not good at all. If you are for some reason interested in playing this, it is only $10 on the PSN store and physical copies are only around $10 as well. So it is affordable, but still, you're better off playing something else. But that's all the time we have for today. Next time, we'll be looking at the Finding Nemo game. I hope you all have an amazing day, and take care. Bye!